At first view, the big sleepy village with its eye-catching signs and tourist shops has nothing to do with the prestigious capital of the new empire that was Thebes for 6 centuries. But going through the village, you can't miss the temple of the god Hammon, still guarded by one obelisk 25 meters high. Its twin was given to France by Muhammad Ali in 1833. The temple at Luxor was mainly the work of 2 great pharaohs, Amenophis III and Ramesses II, between 1400 and 1250 BCE. With the sole objective of welcoming in the new year, the temple the Egyptians called Hammon's Southern Harem, by its sheer size alone, reveals the scale of the annual revels it housed. But despite its colossal dimensions fit for a pharaoh, Luxor Temple is considered small. To the north of the city, protected by 2 rows of ram's head monsters, is Karnak. This is the largest monument in the Egypt of the pharaohs. Really, to comprehend the splendor and richness of the Upper Egypt temples, you have to remember that the pharaohs brought back fabulous treasures from their African and Asian conquests, which they offered up to the god of gods, Ammon. The temples are the physical embodiment of these grandiose offerings. Since they considered themselves to be sons of God, the pharaohs linked their cult to that of the supreme divinity. It follows that every gift to the gods was also a gift to the pharaoh, since royal prestige and divine power were one and the same. And this is how the divinity through the temples became the richest property owner of the empire. And succeeding pharaohs were at pains to add even more columns and obelisks and rooms, new frescoes to associate their reign even more with the glory of God. As a result of this lavish effort, an incredible array of monuments was constructed in the course of 2 millennia, and we are far from piercing all their mysteries. Built in a style that does not span millennia, on a scale more human, the Luxor Museum displays the key pieces most representative of the history and art of Thebes. The West Bank in the days of the pharaohs was a fantastic world, inhabited only by high-ranking dead and the living in their service. Beneath 2 giant 15-meter-high statues, the Colossus of Memnon, Pharaoh Amenophis III traversed the centuries watching over the immense necropolis of Thebes. Today, there are modern means for observing peasant life in this region, which in the past was dedicated to the life hereafter. Gurna and Deir el-Medina, 2 small villages where the inhabitants go about their lives paying not the slightest attention to the ever-present tombs uncovered by the archaeologists. It's here that most of Thebes' high dignitaries were entombed. Rekhmera, Mau, Ramoz, whose tomb is covered with exceptionally beautiful bas-relief sculptures. The queens of Egypt, they repose in a valley where to date some 80 tombs have been found. Many are in need of restoration. One of the best preserved is that of a prince, a son of Ramesses III. Toward the western extension of the mountains, the people of Thebes made tombs for their pharaohs. In the Valley of the Kings, the burial places are constructed according to the same plan. The pharaohs brought to their final resting places overwhelming riches for the next life. These celestial house movings brought generations of grave robbers. The only untouched tomb was that of Tutankhamun. Precious objects found here take up several rooms in the Cairo Museum. Near the Valley of the Kings, a circle of rocks protects the temple built by the architect Senmut in honor of Hatshepsut, the pharaoh queen who deposed her son. "60 kilometers south of Luxor, an agricultural settlement groups its earthen huts. This is Esna. Atop the columns of Khnum Temple, the Ram God, an interesting detail, all the Greco-Roman capitals are different. Another curiosity, the many frescoes are accompanied by texts recounting the festivity rituals of the time. At Edfu is found the best preserved temple in all of Egypt. Dating from Greco-Roman times, it is dedicated to one of the greatest divinities of antiquity, the falcon god Horus, falcon of the sun, all-powerful and warlike, protector of pharaohs. At Edfu, the bas-reliefs are in such a perfect state of preservation that they serve as an inexhaustible source of information about ancient Egyptian thought and religious rite. Dominating the eastern bank of the Nile, the ruins of Komombo, the last vestiges of a temple dating from the reign of the Ptolemy dynasty 3 centuries before the Common Era. Komombo is dedicated to 2 gods, Sobek the crocodile and Hathor the falcon, for here everything is doubled, an essential contrast to nearly all other Egyptian temples. At the gateway to Nubia, there where the great African desert begins, the Aswan High Dam has drastically changed the economic factors of the region and of the whole country. Constructed with the help of the Soviet Union at the request of President Nasser, this colossal work was dedicated in 1971 after 15 years of labor worthy of the pharaohs. Today, its turbines develop billions of kilowatts needed if Egypt is to continue its industrial development. Aswan granite covered the pyramids and was the main material for the tombs themselves. In one of the many quarries in the region lies the largest unfinished obelisk ever found. At Aswan is the first cataract of the Nile. The ancients believed that the country ended there. The city looks quite modern from the tourist cruise ships. one of the biggest attractions of the country. In a felucca, you can come close to the three most interesting sights of the city. They dominate it. The mausoleum of the Aga Khan, housing the mortal remains of the supreme head of an Ismailian Muslim sect who died in 1957, leaving 4 million of the faithful to mourn. The monastery of St. Simeon, one of the oldest Christian convents in the world. And Kubat el-Hawa, the hill on whose slopes are encrusted the tombs of the Elephantine princes. Aswan owes a good part of its charm to the many feluccas that tack back and forth between the granite islands. Elephantine Island owes its name to the form of its rocks, polished with erosion over the centuries. It was the starting point for pharaohs on their expeditions to the south. The only vestige of that glorious epoch is the temple of Khnum, overseer of the floods. While the western edge of the desert is, even here, devoid of vegetation, on Kitchener Island, nature is exploding. In this superb garden, the island of flowers, such an infinite variety of scents intermingle, tropical, Asiatic, and African, that one is overwhelmed in a symphony of colors and perfumes and the call of the ibis. Upriver from Aswan, the waters of the first dam, built by the British, submerged it 10 months out of the year, and the high dam condemned it forever. The Temple of Philae, one of the most admirable monument groupings to be found anywhere. 8 years of work under the aegis of UNESCO were needed to move stone by stone the Pearl of Egypt to Ajilka Island, 300 meters from its original site. The temple at Philae was begun by the pharaohs and completed by the Romans. It was dedicated to Isis, the universal mother, the most popular goddess in all Egyptian mythology, and it welcomed pilgrims right up to the 5th century. Among the columns and bas-relief can be found a reproduction of the Rosetta Stone text, inscribed on a tablet that made it possible to decipher hieroglyphics. Without the help of UNESCO, Lake Nasser, created by the High Dam, would never have engulfed another witness to the grandeur of ancient Egypt, Abu Simbel. The temples to Ramesses II and his wife, Nefertari, were cut into 1,000 blocks, some of which weighed 30 tons, before being reconstructed 64 meters higher in precisely the same relative position they had had. The time had to come when these giants faced certain obliteration before the world would pay homage to this bastion of the pharaoh's civilization. Sinai. Despite the division created by the Gulf of Suez and despite all covetous designs upon it, the history of Sinai has always been linked to Egypt. An immense space, but arid, crushed by an unrelenting sun that crackles the surface of the land. Extremes of climate, however, have not prevented life from continuing and moving from oasis to oasis, the Bedouins fiercely refusing a sedentary society. Despite the difficulties of surviving in it, the Sinai has been fought over since ancient times, often for the underground riches it contains, precious metals, rare minerals, and of course, oil. But there is a new element now that just might push the Sinai into the modern world: tourism. At Sharm el-Sheikh, the southernmost point of the peninsula, there are more than a few touristic jewels, a brilliant sun, of course, but also fine sandy beaches and the limpid waters of the Red Sea. Sharm el-Sheikh has also become a world center for scuba diving. If intentions become reality, through tourism and natural resources, in the year 2000, the Sinai Desert will have a population of 2 million. In the meantime, the word desert means what it says. All the better for those who seek peace and quiet.
At first, of course, is a monastery. This because there is 2 points in this monastery from 3 to end.